At Space Force flag unveiling, Trump heralds secret space program technology releases. At the unveiling of the Space Force's new flag on May 15, President Donald Trump delivered remarks claiming that Space Force is the first attempt by the US to deploy weapons and military forces in space, and the US is merely reacting to what China and Russia have previously done with their own respective space forces. Trump referred to fantastic new weapon systems that are being developed for Space Force, which are far more powerful than anything possessed by China and Russia. Trump's remarks are highly significant. They reveal a covert strategy of transferring weapon systems acquired secretly by a decades-long US Air Force-led secret space program to Space Force, and proclaiming these as new weapons designed to counter recent Chinese and Russian advances in space technology. Here's what Trump said at the flag unveiling ceremony.
Well, thank you very much. This is a very special moment because this is the presentation of the Space Force flag. So we've worked very hard on this, and it's so important from a defensive standpoint, from an offensive standpoint, from every standpoint there is. As you know, China, Russia, perhaps others started off a lot sooner than us. We should have started this a long time ago, but we've made up for it in spades. We have developed some of the most incredible weapons anyone's ever seen, and it's moving along very rapidly, and we have tremendous people in charge.
After saying China and Russia got the early jump on the US, Trump went on to assert that we have developed some of the most incredible weapons anyone has ever seen. This is a very revealing statement, which I will soon return to after briefly reviewing the respective conventional space forces developed by the US, Russia, and China. Trump's statement that China and Russia started off a lot sooner than us is a reference to the creation of new military branches exclusively dedicated to space operations and the deployment of advanced space weapons. In the case of the US Space Force, the first call for its creation occurred during the Bill Clinton administration from 1993 to 2001. A congressional commission headed by Congressman Donald Rumsfeld, before he was appointed Secretary of Defense, advocated the creation of a Space Corps as a separate military branch back in a March 2000 report. The September 11, 2001 false flag terrorist attacks and the subsequent war on terror delayed the creation of a Space Corps until it was revived by Republican Congressman Mike Rogers in 2017 and eventually endorsed by Donald Trump in March 2018 as Space Force. After Congress approved the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act that incorporated the Space Force Act, Trump signed it into law on December 20, 2019, formally creating the sixth branch of the US military. 4 years earlier, however, both Russia and China created space forces as new subordinate branches in their respective military services, which is why Trump is claiming the US is catching up to these major space adversaries in his speech. On August 1, 2015, Russia re-established its Space Force under the newly reorganized and renamed Russian Aerospace Forces that combined the Russian Air Force with its former Strategic Missile Defense Forces. As a subordinate military branch dedicated exclusively to space operations, the Russian Space Forces focuses on a range of missions as described by the website of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Quote, monitoring space objects and identification of potential threats to the Russian Federation in space and from space, prevention of attacks as needed, carrying out spacecraft launches and placing into orbit, controlling satellite systems, including integrated ones, intended to be used for both military and civilian purposes, in flight, and using separate ones towards providing the Russian Federation armed forces with the necessary information, maintaining both military and integrated satellite systems with launching installations and assets of control in the workable order and a number of other tasks." End quote. Only a few months later, in December 2015, China developed a subordinate branch of its People Liberations Army, PLA, called the Strategic Support Force, which integrated space operations that were previously widely dispersed. Here is how Elsa Kanta, writing for Defense One, described the PLA's Strategic Support Force, PLA-SSF. The PLA-SSF's Space Systems Department, evidently a de facto space force for the Chinese military, has consolidated control over a critical mass of China's space-based and space-related capabilities. The establishment of a unified structure through the Space Systems Department seems to reflect a response to organizational challenges that resulted from the prior dispersal of these forces, systems and authorities across the former General Armament Department and General Staff Department. Consequently, while it is true that Russia and China's respective space forces predate the creation of the US Space Force by 4 years, it's wrong to believe that the US is playing catch-up to military resources that Russia and China have previously developed and deployed in space. The formation of the US Space Force is indeed proceeding slowly and lags behind its rival military branches in Russia and China. Currently, the number of Space Force personnel only includes its Chief of Space Operations, General John Raymond, the Senior Enlisted Officer, Chief Master Sergeant Roger Talberman, and 86 recent graduates from the US Air Force Academy. While 16,000 personnel are temporarily assigned to Space Force, these are all US Air Force airmen until they are formally reassigned, which may take up to early 2021 due to the complex bureaucratic process in transferring thousands of personnel from one military branch to another. Also, Space Force is still in the process of having Air Force bases reassigned and renamed after having had new uniforms designed on January 17, its seal approved on January 24, and now an official flag. All this indeed gives the impression that the US Space Force is still a few years off from matching what China and Russia have achieved in space, just as Trump described. However, what Trump didn't mention is that the US Air Force has developed and deployed a secret space program that includes squadrons of electromagnetically propelled spacecraft that utilize anti-gravity principles, along with powerful space-based weapon systems. In the US Air Force Secret Space Program, published in 2019, I provided extensive documentation and insider testimonies detailing the history of reverse-engineered spacecraft that were first deployed in the 1970s. I described how the US Air Force had deployed various designs such as saucer, triangle, and even rectangle-shaped craft that are weapons platforms. Recently, it was learned that the cigar-shaped Tic Tac craft recorded by Navy pilots in 2004 were in fact US Air Force spacecraft being tested against the Navy's most advanced radar and aircraft intercept technologies. The Tic Tac craft was built by a major US aerospace contractor located at Plant 42, which is adjacent to Edwards Air Force Base. As described in the US Air Force Secret Space Program, these advanced space assets are in the process of being transferred over to Space Force. The process will take several years and will require public disclosure by the Trump administration of these newly acquired technologies and how they were developed. In his Space Force flag ceremony speech, Trump is clearly laying the foundation for disclosing the most incredible weapons anyone has ever seen and asserting these were only recently developed for Space Force in order to counter the advanced space weapons produced by the Russians and Chinese. The truth is that Space Force is inheriting such weapons from a decades-long US Air Force secret space program that long ago weaponized space. Rather than playing catch-up to Russia and China, the US has been the clear leader when it comes to the development and deployment of advanced weapons technology in space. This is why China has been hacking, spying on, and stealing US advanced space technology secrets for the last 3 decades to bridge the technology gap, as I described in great detail in Rise of the Red Dragon, published in 2020. Space Force provides a convenient means of disclosing advanced space technologies that the US has secretly used for decades without revealing too much about their historical development and deployment. President Trump's remarks lay the foundation for declassifying advanced electromagnetic technologies that have bewildered Navy pilots and the public for decades in countless UFO sightings. This has been Dr. Michael Salla with exopolitics.org. I have a backup site at michaelsalla.com. Thank you for listening and subscribing to my YouTube channel. Aloha.